Why get involved in politics? What made you decide to run?
You know, quite frankly, I was sick of politicians, to be honest with you. And, you know, I think it's the common man's job to be in local politics. I think that's how the country was originally set up. You know, it wasn't supposed to be a career. It was supposed to be a civic duty. And, you know, you had ranchers and farmers and doctors and lawyers and business owners, and they would go to local politics and serve 4 years or 8 years or whatever, a term or two, and then they go back to their business. And I think that's how it still should be, in my opinion. You know, now you've got career politicians that go onto a city council for 8 or 12 years, and they go on the board of supervisors for another 12, 16, 20 years. And I don't really think they represent the people well enough. I think it needs to get back to the people. You know, I've watched politics over the years, and boy, 6 months before an election, man, they are tripping over themselves to help you out. I mean, you know, you have a question, oh boy, they can't wait to give you a hand. And then as soon as the election's over, you don't see them for 3.5 years. And I've noticed that over and over and over again, and it's time to do something different, in my opinion, so.
Well, should you win, you would be like a 1 or 2 term person.
2 terms at the most, yeah. And I will set term limits. I plan on pushing for term limits, and I think the majority of the board, I think that they will go for term limits. I'm assuming that they will go for term limits. The thing is, anything that a board of supervisors does can be overturned in the future. But my opinion on that is, well, that's fine. Term limits, I believe, are the right thing to do. So if we can put in term limits for, say, 2 terms, that's it. That's all you get. Future boards, they may be able to overturn that, but they're going to have to sell that to the people. They're going to have to explain to the people why it's important for them to be there 16 or 20 years. So good luck to you doing that. I think we can pass term limits and make it 2 terms, and that's it. And with 2 terms, you kind of get in a hurry to get stuff done. You know, I mean, right now it's kind of like, oh, well, we'll work on the jail later, or we'll work on the homeless later, or we'll work on the drug addiction problem later. We'll work on all these things later because there's really no hurry. You know, that the politician's going to be there for 16 or 20 years, and there just seems to be no urgency in getting their plans done. And, you know, all they're really worried about is getting reelected again. So if you take that out of the equation and you're on your 2nd term and you're not going to get reelected, well, then you're going to do what needs to be done, plain and simple. So I just think term limits are very important.
What are the issues that you see in the county that are most important, and how would you propose to solve?
So obviously crime and homelessness, the drug addiction problem, I think those all revolve around a jail. So when I started this 1.5 years ago, I was concerned, those were probably my main concerns. Now, since that time, I live in Cottonwood, and the ACID, the acid canal, the Anderson Cottonwood Irrigation District Canal, has been dry for the first time in over 100 years. It was built in 1914. It was built before Shasta Dam was there. It was full of water before Shasta Dam existed. Those ranchers and farmers and homeowners, for that matter, rely on that water. In fact, it's very important now. We didn't realize how big of a concern it was. You know, we think, well, the ranchers and the farmers aren't going to be able to irrigate their crops. Well, we've got wells going dry everywhere because that water replenished aquifers. That water was a huge part of our community. I'm down in Cottonwood, and it's the environment it's devastating down there. It's devastating. I'm driving down Balls Ferry Road and dodging turtles that are you know, leaving Anderson Creek and seeking water somewhere. It's horrible. I have raccoons at my house that, you know, they won't leave because they're hungry, they're starving, because normally they feed in wetlands, they feed in canals, they feed in creeks and, you know, ponds, that kind of thing. You know, the old adage, the raccoon's always washing its food. Well, it needs to be near water. And now I've got raccoons in my house, and I mean, you know, I have to buy extra cat food because the raccoons come every night and eat all the cat food. And it's you know, it's funny, but at the same time, it's sad. These animals are starving to death. This was all done with no environmental impact report. It was an environmental group down south that was trying to get back at the Trump administration. By the time it worked its way through courts and they found an activist judge in Fresno who sided with them, the Biden administration was in there. So, you know, it's not a blue or red issue. They did this and pulled all the water from all of our ranchers and farmers with no environmental impact report, no geological survey. We don't know what's going to happen when we fill that canal next year. That canal has never been empty all summer long. So is there going to be cracks? Is there going to be holes? Is there going to be fissures? Is it going to break? We don't know because it's never been empty. At the mouth of Cottonwood Creek, we have a state mitigation bank, a wetlands mitigation bank. So in the past where I live, it overlooks kind of Balls Ferry Bottom. There's a lot of wetlands in there. If you wanted to build a barn or you wanted to build a shop or something, you would have to buy credits from this state-ran mitigation bank to offset your damage that you're doing to your own property with the wetlands. Well, if I was one of those people that had to buy mitigation credits, I'd be wanting my money back right now because that mitigation bank is completely dry. It's dead. And that was supposed to never happen. That's why you were supposed to buy credits from them so you could do something on your own property. And now that wetlands is dead. All the animals in it are dead, all the fish, it's dead. And so where's the dollars for the mitigation bank? You promised that would always remain, you know, perfect and great, and you made us buy credits from you, and now it's dead. So again, no environmental impact report was done, and if you and I wanted to do something without doing an environmental impact report, you think we'd get away with it? Of course not. Federal Bureau of Reclamation is in breach of contract. We get 75% of our water allotment, even during excessive drought years, extreme drought years, we still get 75%. They cut us to 18%, which wouldn't have done us any good at all. Couldn't have gotten the water down there. Ironically, we wanted to fix the canal back in 2014 because you know we had some extra money and we wanted to put some bentonite in there or cement some places. And we were told by Fish and Game that we couldn't do it because it's been leaking for 100 years and it's created wetland habitat, and we couldn't ruin that environment. Well, all that habitat's dead now. Our canal still has leaks, and I mean this whole thing is just an absolute fiasco. So I started out with probably crime and homelessness and drug addiction was one of the major concerns. Right now it's water. Water is the #1 concern, at least in Anderson, Cottonwood, and Happy Valley and Shingletown for that matter. They are all having water problems also. So Mark Twain said, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over.
What advantage, or is an advantage, do you have in not being a career politician, in not being law?
You know, honestly, in this day and age, I think people are about sick of politicians. I have an ad right now because, of course, you know, I'm picked on by he doesn't have any experience. So I point out that our current member of the White House, our current president, has a lot of political experience, 50 years of political experience. Nancy Pelosi, right here in California, has decades of political experience. You look at, and we'll look at the other side. You look at, some of the other guys on the other side that have years and years of political experience, and it's kind of like, are we better off? Does political experience really mean a whole lot? We had a businessman in there not too long ago, and it seemed like things were doing a little bit better back then under that guy. So I don't think political experience, I think actually a lack of political experience sometimes is a plus in this day and age. I know one of our first debates, my opponent was bragging about his political experience, which, good for him. He's done a great job. And I went up there and explained, I don't have political experience and I'm not going to be a career politician and I'm all for term limits. And we could tell by the end of the night, more of that crowd was much more in my favor than his favor because people are tired of politicians. And I don't blame them. I'm tired of politicians too,
What do you see coming up for Shasta County, the future? What kind of things would you do?
So the jail, we need to definitely work on the jail. Right now, the board has voted 5-0 to put a 256-bed facility behind the current jail now. When that courthouse is torn down, or the majority of the courthouse is torn down, there will be room for 2 more 256-bed pods. So I believe that we need to leave the jail there. The current sheriff right now, who was a fantastic police chief, as a sheriff, though, I think he's learning. I think he's doing, but he really needs to understand a sheriff's #1 job, #1 priority is the jail. It's not the cops on the street, it's not administration, it's the jail, period. #1 priority. Police chiefs don't worry about jails. So we're finding out that we need to worry about that jail. We have a current jail that's not to capacity. We have a floor closed in it because we can't retain and keep the correctional officers there. So, there's some talk about this wagon wheel of justice and a 1,000-bed facility, which would be off-site somewhere. I'm not for that. I'm for keeping everything downtown. The courthouse is right across the street. You'd have transportation issues when you put this off-site project or this off-site jail. You have the transportation issues. They're claiming now that walking them across the street is as much a transportation issue as it is driving them across town. I don't believe that. I don't buy that. With 4 of these pods in the future, there's our 1,000 beds right there downtown, right next to probation, sheriff's department, the courthouse. Everything's right there downtown. So I think that's where we need to go. That's where I want to go. But we need to address the current jail now. We need to get that thing staffed. So our sheriff really needs to concentrate on getting our jail staffed, getting more correctional officers in there. I talked to a lady that was in administration, and she says back in the day we had public service officers. We had quite a few public service officers in our jail. It was a way for them to get their foot in the door, to start out at a lower level. They didn't have to have all the training that a correctional officer has. And they were the ones that answered phones and ran the boards and, you know, brought in visitors and did all the mundane stuff that our correctional officers really don't want to do now. So when we went in there and toured the jail, I believe he was a sergeant, but he was running one of the boards. Well, I didn't know any better, but according to this woman that I had talked to, she said that's one of the jobs they don't want to do. It's very boring and mundane to them. They don't want to do that. And that's a job that a public service officer can do. And quite frankly, again, it's not as a stringent background. It's not the training isn't as great. So you get some more of these public service officers in there, take over some of the mundane jobs, let our correction officers get back to actually being correctional officers, not answering phones and, you know, glorified secretaries basically. And then when you have some of these people that are pretty good at the public service officers, then that's how you start moving them up. Now send them to training to be a correctional officer. Maybe send them to training to be a sheriff's deputy. This particular person I talked to, she had worked her way up, all the way up into administration because she started out as a public service officer. So if we're having a hard time finding correctional officers, let's fill some of those staffs with public service officers. But one way or the other, let's get that jail we have now back to capacity, and let's get 256 more beds behind it, hopefully by 2024.
What all have you learned?
Yeah, I've learned a bit. There's no question about it. I've learned a bit, and it's been fantastic. I've absolutely loved it. One of the things I want to do is write an ordinance to keep the federal government and the state government taking care of their lands. Now the state, we don't really have too much of a problem in Shasta County. We have Alturas State National Forest, and they do a very good job up there. I've spent a lot of time in that area, and they do a pretty good job. So I don't know how much of a problem the state lands is, but we have some problems especially in our national forest. National parks is great. Alaska National Park keeps their park very well maintained and clear. You get some of the wilderness areas like Thousand Lakes Wilderness, it's a mess. It is a disaster, and it's a giant fire waiting to happen. The parts that haven't burned already. You get into some of Shasta Trinity National Forest, there's quite a big mess in there. I mean, huge fuel loads sitting next door to private property, Sierra Pacific property. So they need to get those in check. Now, I've had people tell me, oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, he's naive, he's a political starter. This shows his lack of experience. Well, I've got news for all of you. I have been talking to all sorts of foresters, retired foresters, ex-supervisors. Trinity County wrote this ordinance in the past, and the federal government curtailed their forestry management plan into this ordinance and tried to stay within the boundaries of this ordinance. I've been talking to retired foresters and retired fuel load experts that have given me my advice on this. And I'm working with them hand in hand and talking to them, not on a daily basis, but I'm talking to them quite often because I plan on writing that ordinance. And I plan on using what they did in Trinity County. I plan on using those experts that wrote it in Trinity County that got it passed. I plan on relying on them heavily to write an ordinance in Shasta County. So it can be done. You have more power at the county level, you know, than a lot of people think. I can't tell the federal government what to do, but I can certainly tell the federal government what I want them to do and how I want them to fit into my ordinance, into my county plan. So, you know, I'm not just winging this thing. I have been talking to a lot of people, and I've been learning a lot of stuff. So,
does that kind of transfer over to other issues?
Absolutely.
In dealing with the federal government or the state government?
Right, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, you know, we have local control here. So, you know, yeah, the state kind of tells us what to do because they, you know, we rely on their money. We rely on a lot of the federal monies. You know, bottom line is their lands are in our county. So if they're not taking care of their lands, I'm not going to sit by and wait for another disaster, natural disaster, huge forest fire, loss of life, loss of homes, and then beg for federal relief dollars. How about you take care of your forests first? And maybe we won't have one of these giant wildfires in the future where we don't have to beg you for federal relief dollars. Let's use your federal dollars to clean up your own lands first. So.
Anything else you'd like to say?
You know, since you asked, sure. Preston Sharp, I would like to bring up Preston Sharp. So that fine young man has done flags and flowers in 43 states. Him and his mother today are leaving for the last 7 states to do flags and flowers. Don't know why I didn't think of this before, but a lot of people that know me, I'm kind of an expert in fundraising. That's one of my things that I do. I talked to Preston and I said, I don't know why I didn't do this for you before. I'm very sorry, but let's have a fundraiser. So December 10th at the Anderson VFW Hall in Anderson, there's going to be a fundraiser for Preston Sharp, and we're going to pay for that kid's flags and flowers for the rest of the year so he doesn't have anything more to worry about. So